welcome everyone. Leah, I think you can open the session now. We are live.
Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. My name is Leah Broom from the Metropolis World Association of the Major Metropolises, and I warmly welcome you to this West ESPON workshop after such inspirational debates we had at the high-level policy debate. This workshop is about the role of metropolitan areas in the cohesion policy. I thank you, everyone who is joining us today. It's going to be a 1-hour session where we have 14 experienced policymakers and experts from across Europe, from Portugal to Poland, exploring opportunities, challenges, and objectives of the cohesion policy in metropolitan areas and how a metropolitan dimension will contribute to the success of the policy in the future. So, some of you are watching us through web streaming from the ESPON website, and some other registered participants are joining us via Teams. For the ones who are on Teams, please feel free to send your questions if you have any inquiries during the session through the chat box, that we will do our best to respond to them over the chat box itself. As we have many speakers, and as I said, our session is only of 1 hour. I also remind speakers to be very short and brief in their interventions. So just to go straight to the point, I warmly welcome Viera Petruzzi from the ESPON European Grouping on Territorial and Cooperation to set the scene for the metropolitan approaches to the cohesion policy, talking about two projects, ESPON Metro and ESPON Imagine. Over to you, Viera.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you very much, and welcome everyone to this session, Cohesion Policy, Backbone of Europe, the Role of Metropolitan Areas. It's organized in cooperation with the Portuguese EU Presidency. I'd like to thank our moderator, Leah Broom, our speakers, and our stakeholders, and of course all of you to be here today with us. Our brilliant researchers and our important stakeholders will introduce and debate evidence and recommendations from two ESPON targeted analysis, Metro and Imagine. You will learn how ESPON Metro is trying to define the role of metropolitan areas in cohesion policy, and at the same time, ESPON Imagine, which is focusing on the Milano-Bologna urban region, will demonstrate that the development of territorial scenarios carried out through the active engagement and institutional and functional stakeholders can generate a new visioning capacity and feed new alliances between places and societies. Yesterday, the Vice President of the European Commission, Suica, focused on the need to ensure the high quality and the quick rollout of the national plans so that investments financed under the Next Generation EU start supporting the recovery. Today, at the early debate at the ESPON Week, Commissioner Ferreira stated the importance of the territory for the success of the policies. It is evident more than ever the crucial importance to anchor the implementation of recovery plans and cohesion policy, those extraordinary tools to change the face of Europe, to the metropolitan dimension. So let's explore how a metropolitan dimension will contribute to the success of the cohesion policy. Thank you and enjoy the session. Felipe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pierre. And first of all, welcome to Lisbon. I hope when this pandemic emergency is over, we can welcome everyone at our metropolitan area and share our experiences face to face. At the Lisbon metropolitan area, we have had the opportunity to be stakeholders of ESPON Metro targeted analysis, and it has been a very rich experience. And we have reflected on the role of metropolitan areas in the context of European cohesion policy, but also of institutional empowerment of metropolitan scale throughout Europe. In this policy context of decentralization approach of programming, management, and implementation of functions of metropolitan authorities, we think that it's very important to pinpoint why the metropolitan scale is particularly well positioned to solve some complex policy issues. Within Metrex network, we have, and regarding these issues, we have already stressed that it's very important to institutionalize metropolitan cooperation. And we must have an important role in the development of a place-based sensitive approach in mobilization of territorial stakeholders. Within this framework, it is for us very important to demand that the new Cohesion Policy for 21-27 programming cycle can address the empowerment of metropolitan authorities to assure that the locally led development strategies could benefit everybody, because in the end of the day, we think that is the main message of the European project. No one can be left behind. To summarize, at this workshop, we will hear policymakers, experts, who will debate how metropolitan dimension will contribute to the success of cohesion policy in the future. No debate is more relevant to us at the metropolitan level. We wish everybody all the best, and we wish everybody a great debate. And thank you for the opportunity given to Lisbon metropolitan area to be here with you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much to you, Philippe. It's very good to start the session with someone representing a metropolitan institution from Europe. To spark some thoughts here, I would like to welcome an opening speech by Paolo Perulli from the University of Piemonte Orientale, which will talk about trust-oriented versus market-oriented EU policies. Paolo, the microphone over to you. Is Paolo connected?
I think Paolo has some technical issues, so
Yes.
we will wait for him and we move on to...
Yes. Shall we wait?
Thank you.
I would say we wait for a minute, see if he can connect, and if not, we will just move to the next block of our conversations, unfortunately, as we have such time constraints. Let's see. Said he's trying to connect. Thank you for waiting, everyone. I'm counting here the seconds, and I think that not to hold us back, in case Paolo can connect afterwards, we can pass the word to him. We can link everything together in the end. So connecting metropolitan experience to metropolitan experience from the local perspectives, I would like to welcome now this block of our workshop, which is dedicated to metropolitan areas, specific metropolitan areas, and the EU cohesion policy. So starting with a speech by Claudia Facero from the Metropolitan City of Turin to present the stakeholder needs on ESPON Metro. Claudia, are you ready?
Yes, thank you, Ria. So, thanks to ESPON program and the Portuguese presidency of the EU Council for inviting Metropolitan City of Turin as lead stakeholder to present the ESPON Metro research to this high-level event. So a few words only to introduce the research needs shared among the 9 stakeholders and picked up by the ESPON program. Sharing with the other metropolitan authorities and analyzing the main scientific contribution on the topic, it was clear that all over the Europe there was a mismatch between the concentration of GDP and population in the metropolitan areas in one hand and the volume of cohesion policy resources directly managed on the other. Now, more than ever, it is evident that the metropolitan areas represent the strategical territorial level for the next future development model. Metropolis represent the main economic engine of the EU, capable of driving the balanced development of large territories, ensuring that no one is left behind, as already mentioned by Felipe. But the absence of metropolitan areas and cities in the direct management or implementation of European structural and investment funds on the territory has negative consequences on the effectiveness of the policies. Another point needing to be investigated is related to the finding that in the face of the metropolitanization process present throughout Europe, heterogeneous models have emerged, both from an institutional point of view and from a specific competence point of view. The group of stakeholders also focused the need to identify what are the elements that characterize the most effective metropolitan model with respect to the objective of the cohesion policy and related implementation tools. This consideration brought to define the three main policy questions identified in the ESPON Metro project and presented afterwards by Professor Cotella, around which we expect to obtain scientific evidences in order to improve the metropolitan capacity to interpret territorial need and implement integrated development program in synergy with the cohesion policy objectives. European metropolis are at the core of the inclusive and resilient development trend of the next years. We are ready to positively contribute to this process, also thanks to the ESPON Metro research results. Our common expectation is that the outcomes of the ESPON Metro project research will represent a real added value for the policymaker at European and member state level, contributing to a new generation of programs truly capable of intercepting and responding to the specific needs of each local community. The metropolitan authorities are ready to take up the challenge, and so thank you for your attention.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Now the perspective from Giancarlo. Giancarlo, can you expand a little more on the...
Yes, I hope you hear me. Do you?
Yes, very well.
And if you hear me, I will also make the presentation larger so that we can go. So basically, thanks Leah, thanks Piera, thanks Claudia, and I'm glad to be here to speak at this privileged event of the Portuguese presidency. I'm Giancarlo Cotella from Politecnico di Torino. What I will present today are some insights from the ESPON Metro project, and basically those concerning how can EU cohesion policy foster better territorial governance and cooperation at the metro level. ESPON Metro is a project that lasts for 1 year and focus more in general on the role and future perspective of cohesion policy in the planning of metropolitan area. It analyzed on the basis of 9 in-depth case studies 3 policy questions. On the one hand, how metropolitan area are involved in the governance of the cohesion policy. On the other hand, what is the added value of cohesion policy in planning and implementation of metropolitan area. And then there is the third question, that is the one that is more relevant for us today, is what role does the EU cohesion policy play in consolidating metropolitan governance and cooperation? And I will try to answer to that. So our first insight, because the project is not finished, we are at half of it, almost we will deliver in November, is that metropolitan areas in Europe means multiple things and are characterized by multiple levels of heterogeneity. First of all, the phenomena are different. If you take the European FUA classification from EU OECD methodology, then you can see that metropolitan areas are different. But they are also different in relation to how they are institutionalized. In some cases, they belong to the administration hierarchy of country. In some other cases, they are not institutionalized at all. And then there is not always a fit between the phenomena and the institution, as you can see on the map on the right. Sometimes the functional urban area is larger than the institution deputed to govern. In some cases, it is the opposite. And then there are multiple other levels of heterogeneities in relation to governance models, special development instrument, budget, engagement with public and private actors, and so on and so forth. But what about our first question? How can the EU cohesion policy contribute to foster better governance and cooperation dynamics at the metropolitan level? Well, First of all, what we notice is that the EU cohesion policy has already contributed to trigger various institutional experimentation and provided quite a large momentum to metropolization in various countries where metropolitan level did not exist. And it is a moment to capitalize upon this momentum. To do that, we think that at the EU and then at the national level, a sort of decoupling of the metropolitan dimension from the urban dimension in the discourse is needed and would favor a recognition of the role the metropolitan areas can play in addressing functional dynamics of supralocal nature. With this, we do not mean that the urban dimension of the debate is not relevant anymore. It is actually very relevant, and there is all this discourse going on sustainable urban development. But to decouple from it the metropolitan dimension, it is crucial in our view. Then we also argue that the logics behind the structural investment funds and their mechanism should be further simplified to allow metropolitan institutions to integrate them more within their own territorial strategies and priorities, so that they could use them to enhance intermunicipal coordination. To this end, integrated territorial investment has been used in 5/9 of the Metro case studies, and it is demonstrated by our study that they have been showing very interesting potential. So we suggest that the adoption by countries and regions, and now they are free to choose if to adopt them or not, should be further incentivized and or regulated or pushed through somehow. But also metropolitan authorities should do their job in that, and they should use EU cohesion policy as a leverage to further stimulate intermunicipal cooperation. And in this way, they could somehow contribute for economic conditionality to overcome particularistic interests of basic territorial unit towards more metropolitan broad vision and priorities. To do so, it is crucial that metropolitan institutions define, first of all, an overarching development agenda and align it to the EU programming period and to the EU programming instruments and priorities, so that it is possible to then open channels to channel funds from the EU cohesion policy programming to the metropolitan priorities. At the same time, metropolitan actors, we suggest they should also act beyond the institutional boundary, especially because this fit between the phenomenon and the institution is not granted, and it does not happen in many places. Metropolitan authorities should somehow try to bypass this constraint. For instance, try to act at the full level if it is larger than them, to interact with what lies outside the boundary. If it is smaller, to act for variable geographies according to the type of territory that they have. Overall, our main message is that to further involve metropolitan area in the EU cohesion policy programming, but in some cases, according to set priorities, also the management of it will introduce new priorities and ideas to complement those that were put forward by countries and regions. And in a time of systemic transformation accelerated by the pandemic, this is certainly of utmost importance. I would say that's it from my side. I think I kept the time, and I thank you very much. I just tell you that you have the link to the ESPON Metro project in the chat. Piera Petruzzi put it there. You can go there and stay tuned on the results of our project. By the end of the year, you will have the final reports there, and you will have also 3 interesting policy briefs pivoted around the 3 policy questions of the project. And with that, I thank you very much for the attention. You can feel free to email me if you have any question further.
Thank you, Giancarlo, for inspiring us and giving this overview. For sure, it's such a diversity of metropolitan institutions that it's the only way for us to understand how to make progress is to understand their complementarities, right? At this point, I think linking with what you just said, I think it's very interesting now that we bring to the discussion 2 representatives of 2 metropolitan areas that are being analyzed in ESPON Metro. So I warmly welcome Alfredo Corbalan from Brussels Capital Region, and who is also speaking on behalf of the Eurocities Working Group on Metropolitan Areas, as well as Alessandra Barbieri from the Municipality of Florence, to provide some short reactions about the overarching goals and objectives of the ESPON Metro. Alfredo or Alessandra, whoever is ready. Alfredo? Are you there?
Okay. Hello. Thank you very much, Leah. Yes, thank you very much for the invitation to the ESPON and also to the Portuguese presidency. And also, I will first speak for the Brussels capital region as case studied in the metro. We do think it's a very important study that the team is doing, and. I would like to share you, speaking about diversity, I would like to share you maybe one specificity of the Brussels capital region compared to other metropolitan areas, is that due to the federal system of Belgium, in Belgium, the region are really autonomous in the negotiation and the implementation of the cohesion policy, whether ERDF or ESF. And that's a case that could inspire other countries to give the opportunity to other metropolitan areas to be able to negotiate and to also and also to manage directly the funding. So that's something that the Brussels capital region is managing authority for operational program on ERDF and ESF for several programming periods, and that can be an added value that could inspire other country towards other metropolitan area. That's one positive aspect. On the other aspect, because of the mismatch that Mr. Cotella showed, of course, we manage cohesion policy on our territory, which is an urban region of 160 kilometers square with 19 municipalities, but our functional urban area is larger. And then, of course, it's spread on the other two regions, Belgian regions, and there we need to have a better cooperation in the implementation of a different cohesion policy program, but also our spatial planning, because also spatial planning it's a competence of the different regions and the federal state in Belgium on this issue has little to say. So that's what I wanted to share to the debates. That it's interesting case for providing other metropolitan areas with more power and tools related to cohesion policies.
And Alessandra, I would now ask you also to bring your experience or concrete experience of governing metropolitan areas from the municipality of Florence.
Thank you, Leah. And I would like to answer or try to answer on how a metropolitan dimension will contribute to the success that have been said in advance. That means the success of the policy in the future, especially now that we are in a crucial moment to build back better, following the experience that we have in Italy. According to our experience, metropolitan city actually should not only be considered significant functional areas that are representing in Italy an urban system of more than 1,200 municipalities of different size for a population of more than 22 million of people. Metropolitan cities also represent, thanks also to their capital cities, a best practice at European level as fundamental players in the national multi-fund operational programming on metropolitan cities that is in the current periodic program 2014 to 2020, Metro, conceived in the framework of the European Urban Agenda for Cohesion Policy. The 14 Italian metropolitan cities and their territories, thanks to their capital cities, among them Florence and Turin, acting as a urban authority intermediate body and are showing the city's capability to work together, but also the aptitude and ability to manage funds for target and performance, according to the urban strategic development that had been based on the two main drivers of the program that are smart city and social innovation. I think that we have to capitalize this experience and scale it up. This showed that we are able and ready to take the role and works for a greener, digital, resilient, and social Europe, even thanks to the direct role that we can have in the management and monitoring of the funds of the Next Generation EU program. Cities have been the most hidden by the crisis, and we have to start from them if we want to be effective and build back better, and we are ready for that.
Thank you very much, Alessandra. I am very happy to announce that I just got to know that Professor Paolo Perulli finally could connect. So I really welcome now his inspiring speech. Please, Professor Paolo, the mic over to you.
Thank you. Sorry for the delay. My speech is a sort of framework. It wants to underline a change of phase that we are facing. And in this sense, I can say that we are already in a new world, but we still are captured by an old world, and Europe has to choose. We are in front really of a phase of change, and let me start from the past. The past is Europe in the last 30 years, based on mostly competition and market policies. It has been in Europe neoliberal, or better, ordoliberal, because the state, the national state, and the national states of Europe have been called for pro-market, pro-competition policies. A subtle, more evoluted way of neoliberalism based on the states. So what our state made during the last 30 years in the European framework, they made what we can call negative liberty policies. What does it mean? Negative liberty, not to protect labor markets, local or national, not to reduce the freedom of capital, mostly financial capital, to circulate in the continent, in the world, and so on. So it was a season of low trust or no trust policies of Europe. Economic agents, according to this framework, to this past framework, act by themselves in isolation and in open competition without cohesion and without being able to rely on each other. The result has been a widening of social and territorial injustice in Europe. Many territories have been left behind, and social inequality has increased. Today, the average earnings in Eastern Europe are 35% below the average. In Southern Europe are 10% below. And the wealth and income inequality has increased. We have to say that. We have to we cannot avoid this crucial point. However, like Penelope, Europe continued to recreate and to make a texture of what was destroyed by liberalization and deregulation of the markets. These textures of another social and territorial continent based on cohesion policies. these are high trust policies based on integration of economic and social actors in glocal societies. Glocal means neither local nor global, but a new space of interaction where each local has a say in global matters like the environment, social injustice, democracy. And there is a normative basis for that. Article 3 of the European Union Treaty on Economic, Social and Territorial Cohesion. So we have two Europes. A pro-market, neoliberal, low-trust Europe, and a new Europe, high-trust, social cohesive, and based on the values of Europe. And the first value is trust. Trust is a reduction of social complexity and risk, and also refers to power as a communicative medium. Trust is a response to the lack of communication or the manipulation of communication by political and technical power. Social trust, the fact that I can trust my neighbor citizens, I can trust you, is a coping mechanism when general uncertainty increases, like today, a maximum of uncertainty today. And trust has a positive impact on local development, on societal goals, even on demography. You know, the demographer has shown that the fertility rates increases in high trust societies. And we can make a lot by trust. And cohesion policies favor all these kinds of trust. They help us to go on. They account only for 1/3 of the European budget, but their role is much bigger. It is paramount, and particularly in the future, it will be more and more important. In the 2050, the world will be made of continental states, and Europe among them, based on social trust, is another way with respect to America and China, both competitors to me, to us, because both based on low trust societies and oriented to and dominated by platforms and monopoly capitalism. Europe has a say today in the world, and European cities are our endeavor, our richness. European city in its history has been the seat of the temple, the market, the hall of justice, the academy of learning. All these institutions, cultural and moral, economic, juridical, and educational, are needed to create an integrated society. Europe, it's true, has no startups like Amazon or Google, like The Economist said this week. It's true. So let's create such a seedbed for a new generation of digital companies, based on trust. Can we make that, giving to the European creative class the role of co-owners of the platforms, and to the European citizens the forms of control over the platforms? Europe can be the future of a better world based on social cohesion values and the protection of the environment, today challenged by wrong human behaviors in the world, particularly in China, particularly in Asia, particularly in America. So let's go on with place-based, local and green cohesion policies in Europe.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Perulli. Indeed, I think your words, especially for many of the speakers who are here representing local city authorities, metropolitan authorities, this brings great inspiration as which are the institutions that have the potential of bringing back this trust and building back ties of cooperation in a more cohesive, after all, way. Our program has been a little bit shifted, but we're still getting back on track on our structure. I would like to invite again for just a minute or so, a few seconds, Alfredo Corbalan, to say some words from his perspective now as a representative of the working group of Eurocities on metropolitan areas. Alfredo.
Yes, thank you, Leah. Thank you again. Yes, unfortunately, a representative from the Eurocity as such was not available, but as the chair of the working group on metropolitan areas, would like also to share some statements on behalf of Eurocities. Two statements mainly that, and also to pick up the word that has been mentioned by previous speakers, that trust, social cohesion, territorial cohesion, a place-based approach. All these words are very dear to Eurocity network. And the first message is that, of course, cohesion policy is very important to provide and to strengthen metropolitan cooperation. And through funding, through projects, through building trust, through building new ways of working together. And in this context, Eurocity call for tools such as ITIs and CLLD to continue in the next programming period, to be experiments and further developed. We also call for the territorial agenda, the urban agenda, but also the future rural vision, to have a strong recognition of the metropolitan area approach and the functional area approach. And as a second message, next to cohesion policy, which is very, very important, we think that metropolitan areas will be key to localize the European Green Deal and to build more circular economy, to manage better ecosystems, to fight urban sprawl and all the challenges that Europe is facing. And in that sense, we really advocate for better urban-rural cooperation. We have to avoid this dichotomy between urban and rural, because territories and citizens doesn't know administrative border. And we are happy to see that the Commission is also understanding that metropolitan and functional approach are critical to achieve this just and green Europe we all want. And from Eurocity, we will be very continue to share this point at European national level as well, and we will be glad to disseminate the result of the Metro project as well in the coming months. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alfredo. Indeed, territories and citizens do not know about administrative borders. For this reason, I'm very pleased now to give the floor to the representatives who will talk us about the experience of the Milano-Bologna metropolitan area, about ESPON Imagine. Silvia Bernardi from the metropolitan city of Bologna and Valeria Fedeli from Politecnico di Milano, to talk us about a little more how this perception of the metropolitan area happens, through your experience. Silvia?
Thank you very much, Lia. Good morning. I am Silvia Bernardi from the Metropolitan City of Bologna, one of the stakeholders of the ESPON Imagine project. The ESPON Imagine project has combined with a very crucial phase for the Metropolitan City of Bologna, and I can also speak for the Metropolitan City of Milan, who was the lead partner, the lead stakeholder in the project. In the last 2 years, indeed, both the two metropolitan cities were involved, have been involved in the construction of their metropolitan territorial plans. Both plans have been approved in the last May. So at the end of the ESPON Imagine project, and both plans address the effects of the climate crisis on the metropolitan areas and put forward strategies and action that are designed to increase the resilience and safety of the metropolitan areas. What we notice that in order to address certain challenges, though, a larger scale is needed, a larger scale than the metropolitan one. As the analysis of the ESPON Imagine project has demonstrated, certain phenomena, such as climate change, environmental safety, and infrastructure investments also, regard an even wider area than the metropolitan one, a regional area. Further, this last year and a half of the Imagine project also saw another important event, I guess you all noticed, the pandemic crisis. Such crisis, as we all know now, generated a wide range of issues, very different issues, some of them connected to the territorial aspects that we deal with within our jobs. For example, accessibility, logistic demand growth, and smart working growth. For example, these are just examples. Some of the criticalities that emerged were already there, and they got worsened by the pandemic crisis. Some new issues also, or a threat emerged, but also new opportunities. What became clear is that the scale of such problems or of such issues is wider than the city scale. A metropolitan vision, so a metropolitan agenda, is now, today, even more urgent than it was 2 years ago. So I would like to give the floor to Professor Valeria Fedeli from the Polytechnic University of Milan, who led the ESPON Imagine research on the Milan-Bologna area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Silvia, for giving me the floor, and I will share a brief presentation trying to highlight some takeaways from the project we have worked upon during this year. It's a great opportunity to share some ideas that we have developed during 1 year, where we have explored a special urban region, the Milan-Bologna urban region. It's an area that goes well beyond the boundaries of regions, institutional regions, metropolitan cities, and provinces. It's also an area which is one of the wealthiest and more densely populated in Italy and Europe. It's a very networked and interconnected urban area, but at the same time, it's also a peculiar bioregion made by a strong relationship between the urban and the rural, the nature and the urban, made of strategic urban functions, as well as very important ecosystemic services. And what we have learned studying this region is, quoting Samuel Beckett, is the importance of seeing acting like a urban region, as Silvia was just saying. Basically, we have created a sort of spatial knowledge, as it was also mentioned by the director of ESPON this morning, which is crucial to identifying trends, but also the basis for spatial and territorial narratives that go beyond boundaries and understand the processes of regional urbanization and their impact. So we developed a regional portrait, trying to look for the material forces that generate a new scale of the urban. But then we have also tried to learn how to build a new regional imaginaries that can also work as governance framework, generating new territorial alliances and regional strategies. And the major legacy of this project is probably the regional forum that we have been developing as a key resource to stakeholders, functional and territorial actors, to develop awareness of the transcalar nature of socioeconomic spatial process and to generate new governance frameworks. Finally, we have explored the potential of ITI. It was already mentioned by Professor Cotella in the first round of presentation, the relevance of this opportunity to produce visionary exercises and developing a regional agenda on strategic policy issue. And we call it a process of regional design. And indeed, these are just pictures of how we work on the regional portrait, ITI, Interreg, AGTC can support the construction of new regional imaginaries. But as it was said, it's not just about cities and metropolitan cities, but also we have to extend this reflection to urban regions which go well beyond the metropolitan logic. And that can build functional interdependencies, able to work on regional commons. Of course, the EU Green Deal is a good framework to work on that, but also not just EU, but also member states should take more and more into consideration the role scale of these urban regions, because as Paolo Perillo said, they will build the future of Europe. And finally, my last word are about the fact that urban regions and macro regions should take the lead and start processes able to deal with the local and transcalar nature of the dynamics and processes we are looking at. And these can build not just local flagship projects, but is able to promote a regional turn in policy making that we consider very, very important. So we will happy to share with you more insights, but this is basically what I think could contribute to today's session.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Valeria. Since you mentioned local flagship projects, I would like to invite now for a round of reactions, short reactions, Sylvia again, and also Andrzej Krakowski from the city of Warsaw and Henk Baumann from the Network of European Metropolitan Regions and Areas. How do you relate this perception of urban regions and metropolitan areas with your own concrete experiences? Sylvia, if you could provide some insights from Bologna.
Yes, thank you, and thanks to Valeria and her colleagues for the work that they have done. I would like to say that one of the key aspects that emerged from the regional portrait is the central role of mobility. The analysis on the Milan-Bologna high-speed corridor demonstrated that such infrastructure led to the growth of cities and the growth of opportunities, but such opportunities should have been better distributed in the internal territories within short and medium distances, and in order to generate more positive effects. And from this analysis, we should learn something. And another need that emerged from both the metropolitan city of Milan and Bologna, but also from the provinces along the Via Emilia corridor, the Via Emilia backbone, is the need to regulate and guide the growth of logistic poles and industrial areas, and the need for policies in this sense. And the analyses have shown that the two cities, the two poles, the two cities, Milan and Bologna, have two very different logistic networks, two very different logistic systems, but both the territories in the last years saw an exponential growth of demand, and we must deal with it. The ESPON Imagine project was, in this sense, very precious and helpful in building a collaboration and setting the agendas on the old and the new challenges that the metropolitan areas must deal with in the next years. And the project also set the basis for a regional approach to some of this challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Silvia. I would like to ask now to Andrzej, how do you see these challenges being faced in the city of Warsaw and the wider metropolitan area? Andrzej, are you with us?
Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. I would like to say some words about project contribution to EU cohesion policy on some practical examples. On the one hand, as a city of Warsaw, Warsaw Metropolitan area, we could have an opportunity to share our experience of implementation of ITI in Warsaw Metropolitan area for 6 years, and we shared this experience with Italian partners. In different aspects, financial, management, cooperation with 39 local communes, our partners. And it was helpful for modeling ITI implementation in Bologna, Milano region. On the other hand, we would like to use the Imagine project results in programming activities in Warsaw Metropolitan area within a new EU perspective. And it is very important for us right now because we have just started works on that. And there is during the project, there was made special research on corridor between Bologna and Milano, where there is a high railway network. And it has strong impact into the functioning of these regions. And we have similar situation in Warsaw, in our region, because there is a quite big city placed 100 kilometers from Warsaw. It is Łódź. And it's going to be built high-speed railway connection also between our cities. And this research results within the project, like specific data, positive trends, threats, challenges, regional development, and special planning will be very valuable for us in designing cooperation between our cities. So I think that the project really contributed to EU cohesion policy and gave us opportunity to develop further activities based on common experience and good practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, very good to know that you can transfer some ideas from Imagine to your local context. After all, this is why we're also gathering here and exchanging such experiences, right? Especially to provide this perspective on networking and connecting with other realities across Europe, I would like to welcome Henk Bouwman, the Secretary General of Metrix. Henk.
Thank you very much, Leah. Thank you, ESPON and the Portuguese presidency for this opportunity to be here, to enjoy the ESPON week. I see fantastic messages about this session, so we can be a bit proud. I think in our view, let's say Metrix represents about 50 metropolitan regions in Europe, metropolitan regions and areas, I must say, not always formally organized, but nevertheless. And I think the Imagine project, I think, showed that there is a common image possible for macro regions, and that it can help to better develop and apply EU policies for that. So ITI or maybe even other new forms can be thought of, and I think this gave really new insights for that. I think the Imagine project also has explored, in my view, a sort of new layer to our planning habits that usually are focused on numbers, on tangible aspects. It has explored how people, businesses, communities perceive the area where they live and work, relax and travel on a daily basis. And I think the use of artificial intelligence in linking the very different data, really different data, and visualizing its output have shown also beneficial in explaining the effects of networks in the wider urban and rural areas of our metropolitan regions. And that is, let's say, those techniques are all there, but I think in this case it was really applied for a specific case, and I think that was really of a sort of, really high level work. And in linking those high-speed regional and local rail connections, as was shown in the studies, to the way people use and experience the area, that study adds, I think, an interesting new tool to the process of planning. So it adds to better planning of rail connections and their huge infrastructural costs, but it also adds to improving smart pricing mechanisms. It adds to thinking about additional services, but it also, I think, can add to a more balanced planning of housing and employment areas in and between metropolitan regions. So you can say place-based, but I think it is also very much with the people in the center, at the center. And I think the research, for me, absolutely asked for a follow-up on various aspects, so I hope this will be picked up in the near future. I think Metrix, we are sure that we'll connect this, let's say, this project also to other ESPON projects where our members are involved in, like the ESPON Stijse, which is in the Euro Delta in the lower Rhine area of the Netherlands, Germany, Belgium, and France. And in that sense, of course, we will disseminate this further. We have already been discussing that. So we are absolutely thrilled about this specific research. And again, putting this sort of more intangible aspects in the center as a result. And I think that is really something for me new compared to a lot of other studies. I don't say they're bad, but let's say this is really something that might also bring us closer, let's say, to the people who really use the area, who live there, who work there, who have a business there. So I think that's a really important aspect that helps us to explain what we are doing and why we are doing things. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Henk. Now we are a little behind schedule, but we are already moving towards our concluding remarks. So I would like to welcome Xavier Tiana Casablanca from the Barcelona metropolitan area to give our first concluding remarks. Xavi, over to you.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, bon dia. Well, it's a very hard task to make the conclusions after such a group of experts and very nice speeches. So what this session makes emerge is that ESPON projects and the work that other institutions, research centers, networks like Metrix, Eurocities, Metropolis are doing shows the importance of this metropolitan movement, or like Giancarlo said, this metropolitan momentum. It has been said that many of the problems that our cities and challenges that our cities and our urban areas are facing require a metropolitan answer to be delivered. In the case of Barcelona, which is the unique constituted metropolitan area in whole Spain, with more than 40 years of supralocal cooperation and very specific powers, there is emerging a movement that I think it's also expanded in other European cities or the world of different economic, social and social stakeholders which are demanding for more metro strategies and policies. These local actors that Professor Perulli was saying, they demand for more metropolitan strategies. But here the big question is with what governance on that? As it has been said, there are different metropolitan structures, whether they are institutionalized or not, whether they come from a local or regional law, or a national law, whether if they come from a volunteer cooperation, more or less established. But what governance on that? Here, there are also different questions to be arised. What fiscality? How do we finance these metropolitan structures? With what powers? Where do we put the administrative boundaries? It has been said the administrative boundaries many times go beyond these metropolitan structures. So this requires, and I like very much what Professor Perulli said, this requires trust. So, and this trust, we need to put together political parties, local and regional institutions, global stakeholders. So with this trust, we need to start this debate. At the same time, and I think it was said in the chat or in some of the interventions, these metro areas, they need a clear voice at the national level. It's very important that these metro areas, these metro regions have a voice at the national level, at the European level, where right now we don't have a clear voice, and also in the international arena. Leah knows very well the work that Metropolis is doing with the United Nations, so very clear. And let me finish by sharing with you a meeting that we had this Monday, where some of the participants were here, a meeting of the European Metropolitan Authorities Network, where we put together around 20 politicians of different European metropolitan areas talking about the national recovery funds. The National Recovery Fund, it can be a missed opportunity if we don't put there a clear action of metropolitan areas. The same with Cohesion Policy. If in the new round of Cohesion Policy we don't put metropolitan areas to act, it's going to be a missed opportunity, whether to implement the European Green Deal or other strategies, or also to give a clear answer to our companies, SMEs, and citizens. So we have this momentum. We have a clear demand from different stakeholders, but the ones that could give an answer to that are not in a position to open this debate. So we need to use projects like the Espon Metro, the Imagine project, which is absolutely interesting for a region like this one, and that could be capitalized, to open minds and to make things change. And that was from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Xavi. Thank you very much. I think your speech shows very much the importance of such initiatives like Espon Metro and all the others. We are trying to understand this metropolitan world we live in, with the diversity, the institutional diversity, and all the challenges that need to be tackled. Last but not least, I invite Honorable Piero Bassetti from Globus and Locus for some final closing words for our session. Mr. Bassetti, the floor is yours. Mr. Bassetti is there. No.
Yes, he is. Maybe the microphone is off.
Yes. Could you please connect your microphone and camera?
Maybe while we wait for President Bassetti.
Is it now? Okay.
We can't see.
I would say that it's the big responsibility to conclude such an extremely interesting discussion. And in fact, as already been said, I think that we have to conclude in political terms, because I think Paolo raised many questions, political questions, questions of value, but also questions on institutional possibility of giving answer to those questions. And in fact, the last intervention by Tiana Casablanca mentioned what, in my opinion, is the main point: the capacity of the institutional setup to fulfill the requested necessity, politically requested of the situation. Basically, in a special situation like the one of the recovery fund, where we have got money, but we have to give solutions made and obtained with money, because money is not sufficient to solve the problem. Well, we have developed an interesting work during the IMAGE project, which has demonstrated that in an area of great relevance for Europe, such as the region between Milano and Bologna and the Po Valley, there are ongoing processes and new dynamics between territories and functions that need to be governed to achieve political results quite necessary. Nevertheless, we should admit that the actual institutional setup, this is the basic point, is not in condition to govern the type of dynamics that we have seen in action. For example, for functions like the mobility, logistics, environmental issues, in front of which we currently have very limited means of government and regulation on a metropolitan and regional scale. Today, more than ever, we see that these emerging needs challenge institutions to redefine their own forms of governance, as well as the nature of their governance. Both territorial and functional institutions are in fact increasingly called to play a key role in building new processes of governance and policy planning. As it has been enlightened during the project, the organic connection between local and global levels require a new government capacity of the territory to reorganize itself. It is obvious that this requires a new political compromise with its functions. It's because it's absolutely sure that there are political items like the one mentioned by Paul, but we have also to admit that the whole structure of our institution has to be rethought somehow if we want to build a new Europe with a different institutional setup for what exists now. As a matter of fact, the ESPON Imagine project involved local government and stakeholders of the main economic and territorial functions in a discussion on the development of a regional imaginary, imaginary, and an integrated territorial strategy between Milan and Bologna in the framework of the existing practices and regulation. But in a future perspective, our work should contribute to foster the development of strategic networks and programs at the European level, able to govern the transformation of urban and regional scenarios, both within the Milano-Bologna corridor, as well as by acting as an example for other corridors and the European urban regions, because there are not many metropolitan regions like the Po Valley in the rest of Europe, at least for bigness. For this reason, we should stress the fact that these problems require new government technique and advocate changes in the institutional setup, because the actual institutions have not the power which is necessary to govern them. I am convinced that with this project, the stakeholders involved and ESPON have posed an extremely important problem to Europe as such. Which Europe do we want to build on a local basis and territorial basis? I think it must be the Europe of cities and urban regions, but with an effective power on what is going on at cities and urban level. Therefore, a manifesto from urban and metropolitan regions and their main actors asking for new local and transcalar forms of governance at the EU level should be extremely important. And that is what I strongly advocate. Thanking everybody who has worked in Expose Imagine program for what we have been thought and in a sense implemented. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the brilliant words. I think we couldn't conclude any better. I'm just going to recall some ideas from the director of ESPON in the session earlier this morning when he said that when we work with multi-level governance, the bottom up and the top down get together. I think that from all that has been exposed here, the metropolitan scale, it's a very good and interesting starting point to work on multi-level governance. So it brings a lot of inspiration thinking about these experiences and studying them and analyzing them better. For such, I thank you again for the participation of the speakers, the panelists, and also the attendees, and encourage you to keep following the results of ESPON. As Giancarlo Cotella mentioned earlier, the final report of ESPON Metro should be released between end of October, November this year. So stay tuned in the upcoming activities. Thank you so much for joining and have a great day.